On the bench today, I have my SDRPlay software-defined receiver. And what I'm going to do today is experiment with the SDR Console application. Before I get started with the SDR Console installation, I'll talk a little bit about this particular computer. This is an Acer Aspire Timeline X with an Intel i3 processor and 4 gigs of RAM installed. It's also running Windows 7. This particular laptop was something that I got at my town's recycle center a couple of weeks ago. I stopped there to drop off some other broken electronics I had, and I saw this was sitting in the top of the bin. The screen had been broken. You can kind of see where I glued it together, but it looked fully functional. There were no cracks in the screen or anything like that. It just was separated from the back and kind of hanging loose on the hinge there. The computer actually had its original box and charger and everything was there, so I decided to grab it and see if I could get it working. When I got it home, I couldn't get it to boot originally. I had to do a complete factory reset from the installed restore partition, and then I used some epoxy and kind of just glued this all back together, and now it seems fully functional, and it's a good candidate to receive some SDR software. In order to download SDR Console, I've navigated to the SDRPlay website, which is at www.sdrplay.com. So as of February of 2017, this is what the page looks like. This, of course, may change as time goes on, but this is how it's done as of this point in time. Another thing to mention is that before I go any further, I'm going to make sure that the RSP1 is not connected to the computer. If it is connected to the computer, that can cause problems with the installation of the software and the drivers necessary to run the RSP. So I'm going to navigate to the downloads page. You can see the way this is structured is that all of the software choices are over on the left side and all of the corresponding documentation is on the right side of the page. Furthermore, the software options are broken down by operating system for Windows, Linux, Mac, Raspberry Pi, and Android. And of course there are a few different packages to choose from: SDR Uno, HDSDR, some plugins, and here's SDR Console. The first choice is version 2.3, which will work only with the RSP1, which is fine, that's what I have here. But I'm going to go with the newer SDR Console version 3 and try that out. In order to download it, I'm going to simply click on this download icon. And you'll see down here in the lower left that the download will begin. Now that the download is complete, I'm just going to click on the icon down here, and you can see that a security warning appears, and I'm going to allow this to run. And at this prompt, I am going to allow this application to make changes to my computer. Here, I'll accept the license agreement and choose Install. At this point, the Mirix drivers are installed. So I'm going to continue on with this, agree to the license terms. I'm going to allow all of these items to be installed on my computer, so I'm going to leave them checked. And I'm going to accept the default folder. And now I'll choose Finish. And now I'll continue on with the installation. And once again, agree to the license agreement. And also again, I'm going to allow all of these items to be installed to the computer by leaving them checked. And I'll choose Install. This prompt is letting me know that Visual C++ 2010 is going to be installed. I'm going to allow that. And again here, I'm going to allow Visual C++ 2013 to be installed. And once that's completed, I will choose Next and Finish. And if I minimize the web page, you can see that SDR Console has successfully installed and has already started itself up. Now that I've got SDR Console installed and up and running, I'm going to connect the RSP1 to the computer and let the device driver find it. Before I get started receiving any stations with the RSP1, I'll do a quick tour of the software. Up top are the typical menu tabs, and when clicking on the menu tabs you can see that the menu bar below changes to display the available options through each of the tabs. I'm going to start on the Home tab and stick with that one for now. Down here on the left is the main frequency display and sort of the tuning dial, you could call this. Below that is a setting to change the audio output if you wanted to direct the output to a secondary sound card or some other application. Down below that is a volume slider. This controls the volume of the audio being sent to the speakers or whatever device was chosen above it. This pane shows the current filter settings and shows a real-time display of what is being passed through the current filter. Down here are some filter presets. So, for instance, this one is synchronous AM, CW, so on and so forth. Down here are some preset filter bandwidths. So you can see 2.2 kilohertz, 2.4, so on and so forth. More on that stuff later. So now I'll scroll this down, and you can see there's a few more settings. There's some AGC settings and some various other settings down here, such as CW, noise blanker, noise reduction, notch filters, and squelch. And then of course over here on the right side is the main spectrum display and waterfall display, and sort of a quick frequency jump display, which I'll demonstrate a little bit later. Down here in the lower right are the CPU usage meter, a latency meter, and a memory usage meter. And then over here on the right are some controls that help control the spectrum and waterfall displays. So to get started receiving a station, I'm going to first go up here to the upper left in the Home tab and click on the Select Radio icon. If multiple SDRs were connected to this computer, there would be multiple choices here to choose from. But in my case, I just have the SDRPlay, so I'm just going to keep that highlighted, and then I'm going to come down here and I can change my bandwidth setting from some presets here. There's, as you can see, as low as 500 kilohertz all the way up to 10 megahertz. I'm going to leave this on 2 kilohertz. That seems like a good bandwidth to start with. Down here in the lower right is a definitions button, and that allows some fine-tuning of the options for each of the selections. You can edit and delete SDRs, you can search for SDRs, so on and so forth. But I'm not going to fool with those options right now. So I'll just make sure the SDRPlay line item is highlighted, and I will choose Start to turn the radio on. And as you can see and hear, the radio is now receiving signals. I should mention that I've got an external antenna connected to the RSP, and that antenna is a fan dipole with legs cut for the 80 and 40 meter ham bands. So to start off, I'm going to go to the AM broadcast band by going here to the tuning display and putting my mouse in this register and then using the scroll wheel to kind of tune down. So once I get the frequency dialed in that I want, I'm going to go over here to the right side of the spectrum display, and I'm going to center the display on the frequency that I've chosen over here. So now you can see that over here in the spectrum display there's a bunch of spikes representing stations or maybe some noise that I have in the shack. The green line here shows the current amount of the spectrum that's being passed through the current filter selection. which at the moment I have set to synchronous AM. So I'm going to change this to regular AM, which really isn't in the list right now. So I'm going to choose this option with the 3 dots. So interestingly enough, the software has now become unresponsive once I clicked the 3 dot option here. So it looks like I'm going to need to kill it and restart it. I've restarted the software and I've actually rebooted the computer as well. And now that I've got everything up and running, what I've discovered is that with the radio stopped or turned off, I can click on the options button here and it displays the available modes right away. If I try and click this while the radio is playing, that's when the software hangs and everything kind of stops working. So anyhow, these are all the available modes that are supported by SDR Console, and I've clicked a few here that weren't clicked by default and added them to the list, and they now appear down here. So as you can see, I've got AM selected, and I'm going to start the radio again, and now you should be hearing WTIC coming through the speakers if I turn the volume up a little. It's not coming in real well. That station's not real far away, but it is 10:30 in the evening, so conditions are probably not favoring it at the moment. So anyhow, you can see that there's a lot of activity up and down the band here. I'm not sure if all of these are stations in particular or if some of this is noise generated by the appliances in my house. In particular, probably the Wi-Fi router is causing some of these spikes. But in order to narrow this spectrum scope up, I'm going to go over here to the right side of the display, and I'm going to make sure that this up here says zoom. Clicking on this changes it to various modes, but I want zoom at the moment. When on zoom, this particular button will center the display on the frequency that's tuned over here. Now, I've previously done that, so clicking on that isn't going to change anything at the moment. So I can click on this slider to narrow up the particular passband that the radio is receiving and displaying in the spectrum scope. So the effect of this is that it not only zooms in and shows more detail in the spectrum scope, I think this actually narrows up what the software is sort of processing and dealing with. And the narrower I make it, the more responsive everything seems to be here in terms of usage and sort of like click speed and things like that. So each one of these spikes here in the spectrum display should represent another station that can be tuned to. And in order to tune to it, I can just slide the cursor over near one of the spikes. You can see the frequency display is here, and when I click, the radio will tune to that particular frequency. So now I've selected 1090. And conditions here really aren't that good tonight. I'm hearing a lot of noise coming in with all these stations, and in fact, so now if I want to keep moving around in the band, I can do that by going over here and tuning like I did before with the mouse wheel. But I can also go down here below the waterfall display, and I can grab this sort of grayed out area, and I can slide this around to kind of bring it up to another frequency. So I'll kind of go up here, I'll bring that up to 1400, and once I let the mouse button go, you can kind of see it centers it over here. Now the radio is still tuned to 1090. You don't see the green indicator showing that the tuning is here. So if I want to actually tune to this frequency, I'll bring the mouse over and click on that, and now I'm tuned to 1400. So I'm back over here at 1080 again, and you can kind of hear there's some noise on the signal, some white noise, or something's going on with with the signal tonight. It's not a real listenable signal. So I'm going to play around with some of the settings. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the menu option, and I'm going to turn on the low noise amplifier and see if that cleans anything up. So you can see that it sort of brought the noise floor down a bit, and that did seem to help a little bit. I think another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to widen the filter out a bit. I've got this set to 6 kilohertz now. I'm going to go to 8. And now I'm hearing just a little bit more fringe noise now. So that's not really helping anything. I think what I'll do now is maybe just get off the AM broadcast band. I'll try the 80 meter ham band and see what's going on there. I've tuned up to 3.814 megahertz, which is in the 80 meter ham band. I've set my mode over to lower sideband, and I've set my filter setting to plus or minus 3 kilohertz. Over here in the spectrum display, I've toggled through some of the options here. I've zoomed in a little more by going to the zoom mode and sliding the slider up a bit. Then I switched over to the high mode and I zoomed in a little bit by dragging the slider down to kind of show a little more of the amplitude of the spectrum display here. And then switching over to this low mode and using the slider, I can sort of raise and lower the position of the displayed signals in the spectrum display so that I can kind of show the signals at the bottom and let the spikes go to the top. And there's a little bit of a latency here with this now. It's starting to respond a little bit slowly. And then down here in the waterfall display, if I click the auto button, it sort of resets this to, I guess what you could call like a factory default color setting. But I'm going to slide this up a little bit by clicking over here and dragging it up. And that'll kind of tone it down a little bit. As you can see down here, the spectrum display. So I've been listening here for a little while, and I've noticed the spectrum display seems to work okay, but the waterfall display is a bit choppy. It seems like it's kind of broken up a bit. So what I found is that coming over to the View tab, I can change some of the settings of the spectrum display and waterfall display. So first I can choose the scale, which sort of has the same effect as going over here to the high and low and moving the sliders around. Smoothing changes sort of the behavior of the spectrum scope. If I put this on triangular, you can kind of see that it smooths out the display. It's not quite as harsh anymore and is more sort of averaged out, I guess. And once I do that, it sort of straightens out the waterfall display, and that seems to run a lot smoother now. I can choose another smoothing method over here. I can go to the least squares method and do low, medium, or high. I'm going to choose high and see what that looks like. And it looks slightly different, but still sort of has the same effect, I guess. So over here I can choose to display peak signals. So you can choose 1 to 5. If I choose 5, you can kind of see what's happening over here in the spectrum display. It sort of alternates between showing you which particular signals were the strongest at any given time. I'm going to turn that off. And then choosing this maximum button kind of shows where the signal maximums are. I'll turn that off as well. So over here in these three options, I can choose the behavior of the waterfall display down here. In particular, I'm going to change the speed. I usually like this waterfall to display a little bit slower. Now that set to 10 might be a little bit slower than I usually like. I'm going to bring it up to 20, and that feels a little bit better to me. Here I can change the resolution. Right now you can see that it's shown at ×2. I'm going to go over to default and see what happens there. And let's see what 8x looks like. Yeah, you can kind of see at 8x it smooths this out and makes it look almost a little bit fuzzy. I'm going to keep that at default. And then over here I can change the color of the waterfall display. I'm going to switch this over to Mother Nature. Oh, that changes the spectrum display too. So I'm going to change that one. Okay, I kind of like the way that one looks. There's a little bit more contrast in the waterfall display. It's a little harsher on the eyes, but gives you a better idea of what's going on. And then it looks like there's some custom colors that can be defined here as well. But I'm not going to fool with that right now. What I think I'll do now is tune over to the FM broadcast band and see how things work there. If I go up here to the menu bar and click on Favorites, I should be able to shortcut to the broadcast band by clicking over here on FM button over here and then go to the CCIR option. And as you can see, that brought me right to 97.75. It automatically set the mode to broadcast FM and set the filter to 250 kilohertz. So I'm going to tune this down to a station that should be strong here and should work with the antenna that I have. I'm going to center this. So here I'm tuned to 91.7 WHUS, which is typically the strongest FM station at this location. And you can kind of see that the bandwidth is nice and wide to receive the nice wide FM broadcast signal.
Well, let's go into the classic, what everybody knows.
So I think now I'm going to try and tune in a narrow FM station. I'm going to go back up to Favorites in the menu bar, go to the Amateur button, and I'm going to go all the way down to the 2 meter option, which brings me up to 146 megahertz. I'll go back home there first. I'm going to tune up to 162.475, and that's my local NOAA weather station. Now I'll change the mode over to narrow FM, and you can see that my filter is automatically changed to 12 kilohertz. So now I'm going to start the radio, and I'm going to center the display. And you can hear the NOAA broadcast station there coming in good and strong. So now here's another one. I'm going to click over here. Almost sounds like there's 2 stations coming in at the same time there. Here's a weaker one. I'm going to see what that one sounds like. So, wow, there's a bunch of these that look like they're active. So that's interesting. I didn't realize I could get that many of these stations at this location. So one last frequency for tonight. I've tuned to the CB radio band, in particular channel 38 and I've gone to lower sideband, and I've got the spectrum display set up and everything. You can kind of see that there is a signal there. I'm going to zoom in on it a bit. So nice quiet band. Signal's real copyable here. Well, since it's getting a little bit late here, I think I'll wrap the video up now. I think I've gone through most of the basic operation of SDR Console. There's a lot more options and features and things to play around with this software. But what I covered was sort of the basics that can be used to just get up and going with it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.